Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here, and we have a brand new spoiler season with new legendary creatures. War of the Spark seems like it's going to be amazing. Let's jump into the very first legendary creature that I'm going to make into a commander deck. It's Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. Neheb Dreadhorde Champion is 2 red for a 5/4 trampling zombie minotaur warrior. Whenever Neheb deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana as steps and phases end. So Neheb comes down super early, turn 4, swings in for 5 damage, is pretty reliably going to hit someone because it has trample, and then you can discard your hand and draw that many cards. That's a really powerful loot effect, but also ramps you because as many cards as you discard, you get that much red mana. Man, Neheb has made some big changes to Commander. The last Neheb was amazing as well. Now, does this Neheb stack up to the old one? Should we even be comparing the two? We're going to find out exactly how Neheb fits into Commander in a little bit. But when Neheb helms a Commander deck, we know we need to embrace this discard effect and this mana generation. And we know that we need combat damage to get this powerful effect, so we're going to need to have some combat synergies in this deck. And with so many cards going into the graveyard, we're going to want to embrace a graveyard strategy as well. I can imagine a lot of different directions Neheb goes, but first let's find out how Neheb fits into other commander decks. Well, you see, the strengths of Neheb mirror the strengths of the color red. The Locust God cares about wheel effects, and Neheb lets you selectively wheel almost your entire deck. Garna the Bloodflame cares about sending things to the graveyard and lets you rebuy them into your hand, allowing you to discard them again to Neheb next turn. Grusilda Monster Masher lets you mash monsters together, and Cedrus Trader King really lets you get value once you have creatures in the graveyard. So we can see some themes here. Discard, graveyard, wheel effects. These all work so well with this brand new commander, and I would love to have Neheb in any of these decks. And I'm personally working on either a Garna the Bloodflame or a Grusilda Monster Masher deck, and I can't decide which one. It's tearing me apart. Okay, but back onto Neheb. I think that it's going to fit in so many different decks, but let's explore the strengths and weaknesses and why we would choose to have Neheb lead a deck. Well, one reason why I think Neheb would be really good at the helm of a deck is that red is a little bit weak at card draw, and some of the best card draw in red, like Wheel of Fortune, is $1 bajillion. Okay. And I know we have other powerful red commanders. Original Neheb can be broken, it's very cool, but it might not fulfill your specific need. And this Neheb is a little bit more self-contained. It draws you cards and it produces mana that you can use to cast those cards. It seems just to match really well. And so we can embrace that strategy by drawing more cards. Alhemerit's Archive will let us discard cards and then draw twice as many cards, giving us card advantage instead of just card filtering. Psychosis Crawler can lean into this card draw archetype and really just drain our opponents out. We can also gain lots of value by discarding cards that are designed to be discarded. Squee Goblin Nabob belongs in the graveyard because you can always bring it back to your hand. Library of Lang lets you cheat Neheb's discard because you can discard to the top of your library and then immediately draw those cards again, just generating the mana you need. And cards like Anger belong in your graveyard. In fact, there's going to be a lot of cards that synergize with the graveyard in this whole deck, so that's going to be a theme you're going to want to pay attention to. Remember how I said I felt red really goes well with Neheb? I think that's true. And one thing is that when a color matches your commander, then you're going to have a lot of synergies within that color. So card draw like Wheel of Fortune, Faithless Looting, Cathartic Reunion, notice all of them also put cards into your graveyard. And so you don't rely heavily on Neheb all the time to get value. You can get value by just playing with red. You can throw away the Squee Goblin Nabob with Faithless Looting, or combine Alhemart's Archive with Cathartic Reunion to draw 6 cards. So I feel like there needs to be some level of redundancy, and I think that red is really, really good at that. Now, I've imagined a few distinct ways to build this deck, and one of them has to be a spell slinger deck. Red is awesome at bringing spells back from the graveyard, so if we're chucking a bunch in there, we can get them back, get tons of value, and spells are really good. So cards like Goblin Dark Dwellers and Charmbreaker Devils are both powerful creatures that can bring spells back from the dead. We also have cards like Past in Flames and Recoup. Both of them bring cards back, let us cast a bunch of stuff from the graveyard, so it doesn't matter if we're throwing them away with our commander or wheeling them away with other effects in our library. I also love that these have flashback. So good, because when we pitch them to Cathartic Reunion or Neheb, we can then get value by flashing them back. So good. But I think the thing that we've all been dreaming of is a different kind of use of our graveyard, and that would be a card like Mizzix's Mastery. Let's just skip down to the overload cost. It's 5 red, but remember, we can sometimes generate like 4, 5, 6, 7 mana from Neheb's ability. So casting Mizzix's Mastery early is going to be not that hard, and having a huge graveyard is also going to be pretty easy. Okay, let's read the text. Exile all the cards that are instants or sorceries in your graveyard, and for each card exiled, you can copy it and cast it for free. Just every instant or sorcery, pa-pow, pa-pow, immediately cast. I love it so much. And I think that we're going to be casting it way more than even you could anticipate. Next, we have Volcanic Vision, another rebuy effect. This one is very expensive at 7 CMC. It lets you return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, and then it deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to each creature your opponents control. I love one-sided board wipes, especially when you need to get your commander in for damage to get all that sweet card draw and mana value. Next thing red is really good at is copying spells. So cards like Bonus Round or Pyromancer's Goggles could go really well in this deck, allowing you to copy these big splashy spells and do tons of damage to your opponents. You know, I've talked a lot about spells that you copy or spells that you get back or Mizzix's Mastery overloading them, but you haven't really run across very many spells that do stuff. So make sure that you pick out a few critical cards, maybe ones that interrupt your opponent, like, I don't know, a Chaos Warp or a Vandal Blast. Maybe cards that just win the game out of nowhere, like Insurrection, or cards that produce tons of mana, like the thing that's on the screen right now and Brass's Bounty or something like that. Just go crazy on fun spells in this type of build. Okay, clearly red is great with spells, but another avenue that you can go down is in the area of artifacts. That's another category that red is great at bringing back. You can weld them back onto the battlefield with Goblin Welder. Felled into the Third Path creates amazing copies over and over again. And Duretti Scrap Savant can do a one-off Goblin Welder, but then also lets you discard cards to draw them. That's the exact synergy you want because your commander has it. Other interesting spell effects with artifacts are cards like Scrap Mastery. I love imagining the scenario when you hit with Neheb, discard your hand, and then Scrap Mastery it all back straight onto the battlefield. So good. And then Trash for Treasure is a one-off exchange again. Just being able to switch out artifacts from your graveyard while you're filling it up and drawing more cards is going to be super powerful. And artifact recursion is a known synergy in the format. Junk Diver, Mer Retriever, Scarecrow, Scrap Trawler, so many cards get artifacts back, and so putting them to your graveyard is a huge advantage. You can also activate some cards from the graveyard, almost like flashback. We have Soul of New Phyrexia, making everything indestructible, including your very vulnerable commander. Also just a big old 6/6 beater. And then finally, there's one other artifact that I threw in here because it's just so good. Crucible of Worlds, an amazing artifact, but then allowing you to play lands from your graveyard, so good. And Drownyard Temple, again, another way to ramp from your graveyard. Man, whenever you can get lands from your graveyard onto the battlefield, it's just basically card draw in this deck. It's really strong. I might have been talking up Neheb a little bit right now, because there's a significant hoop you have to jump through to get all of these amazing things going. And that's, you have to hit with Neheb. A combat phase is super important, and sometimes, man, it really gets in the way of getting your deck going. I know this for a fact because I used to have a Yidris Maelstrom Wielder deck. It was 4 CMC, and with a good mana base, I could get it out really fast. It was a 5/4 trample. Oh, imagine that. This sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? But it was really, really hard to hit with Yidris because everyone was so aware of it and was quick to remove it. And then it was harder and harder to get out again. And so I feel like that could be a concern when we have a deck built so closely around our current commander. Now, that might be a small concern, but overall I feel comfortable with this deck, and that's because red discards so well anyways. All of these looting effects that I mentioned, Dreadhorde or Cathartic Reunion or Wheel effects or Faithless Looting, all of them work really seamlessly together. So even without your commander, I think that this graveyard cycling deck will be really powerful. It'll just be slower because Neheb gives us the mana to immediately deploy that graveyard synergy. Whereas if we are paying mana to like do all this stuff, like we pay mana to wheel, and then we try to pay mana to flash something back, yeah, that's all mana that we need right then versus mana that Neheb has produced for us. I hope you understand that distinction. Okay, one other thing that we can do with combat though is embrace it. Okay, we've talked about spells, we've talked about artifacts, but this could be just a smashy creature strategy. And in that case, we have cards like Aggravated Assault. This amazing enchantment lets you keep getting more and more combat phases. And Neheb keeps generating you mana. And so with 5 cards, you can just keep getting combat phases over and over and over again as you churn through your deck and keep generating 5 mana and keep attacking with your commander. That's a good way to win a game. And then there's lots of other multiple combat steps, but I've thrown in Seize the Day to take a look at because, again, that magical keyword of flashback, so good. And remember, if we're going to have a combat strategy, we might just pump up Neheb to do all the damage she needs to on her own, Sword of Light and Shadow, protection, pumping ability, life gain, and also, some graveyard synergies, returning creatures from your graveyard to your hand. And then Fire Shrieker as well, giving us double strike, that'll give us double triggers, double the mana, and really do a lot of damage, which has me feeling pretty good as well. So what did I learn about Neheb in this deck? Well, even though I might be the most excited about including Neheb in decks that have multiple colors in it, so I have more support, I think that Neheb would do a great job as a commander. I think it just depends on how you want to build your deck. You can check out how I built the deck by clicking on the link in the description, and then you can start riffing on it and building your own. As you can see, there's different paths to go down, and I'm not going to choose all of them. I might not choose the one that you like the most, but hopefully some of this could give you some ideas of possible pitfalls. And sometimes the idea of saying, well, I'm going to have an artifact, spells, combat matters, creature deck, no, it gets too complicated. So I really want this deck tech not to be a build it this way, but instead recognize that Neheb has some shortcomings. So that means you're going to want some redundant effects in this deck so that you're not always reliant on your commander. And then you go down a lane you want to and get excited about building something super cool. And remember that this deck tech, like my entire channel, is brought to you by TCGplayer.com. Thank you guys for supporting me, and also thank you patrons. If you want to be a patron, check me out at patreon.com/jumbocommander, and stay tuned to this channel. You should probably subscribe because I'm going to be pumping out so many good deck techs because War of the Spark is phenomenal. You're also going to want to be notified when I release my free preview card from Wizards of the Coast coming out later. So thanks for watching, guys. There'll be more stuff coming your way. Bye.